Today on The Joy of Editing, it's a TK special edition. Today I'll show you how we can create line art with edge masks using TK9. Stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. Something a little bit different today. This is a special TK edition. Today I'll show you how to make line art with edge masks using the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. But first I have something special to tell you. Sean Bagshaw has just released a new video entitled Iceland Highlands. This is a complete workflow video by Sean Bagshaw. It's $49. Right now there's a special launch sale pricing for this video. You get 25% off everything on Tony Kuiper's web store. The sale ends February 29th, 2024. And I would ask you to please use my promo code DK15, which normally gives you 15% off everything on Tony Kuiper's web store. But during the sale time, the DK15 will get you 25% off everything. That's the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. That's any training videos. When the sale ends, my DK15 will go back to 15% off. But right now, it's 25% off. When you use my code, I make a small commission, and this helps support my channel, The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. If you don't yet own the TK9 plugin for Photoshop, now's a good time. It's on sale. And also check out Sean's new complete workflow video, Iceland Highlands. I'll have links in the description below. And again, I really appreciate your support. All right then, let's jump right in. We're going to have some fun today making some line art with the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. And this is not hard to do, and I think you might enjoy it. Now, I do want to say up front, this probably works the best with architectural type photography, and I have 3 different stock images that I'll be working from today. This one, and I have this one, and this one. So we're going to see what we can do here making line art, and I'll show you some different variations, and I'll give you some tips, and we'll just play around and have some fun. All right, then we're looking at this image right here, and you'll notice right up in this shadow area here, it's a little bit on the dark side. So what we can do is come and grab a curves adjustment layer or levels. Today, let's use levels. I'm going to click this button on the MultiMask panel. Gives us a levels adjustment. And what I want to do is take this mid-tone slider and I'll just start to drag it to the left. And you'll notice those shadow areas are lightening up. And what that is going to do for us, and right about here is good, what that's going to do for us is bring out some more edges in that shadow area. And that's my first tip when making line art. If your shadows are too dark, you might not see edges there. So if you lighten up those shadow areas, you'll be able to bring more of those edges out. And now it's time, everyone, to make some line art. So what we're going to do is come up to our trusty MultiMask panel, and you see this button right here. It looks like a flower. Click this button, and this opens up edge masks. Inside of edge masks, we have this button right here, which will maximize these lines. This will minimize the lines. I'm only going to use this button right here. I'm going to click it and the maximum dialog comes up. And what I like to do is take the radius to the right. Now, normally the lowest setting here would be, I believe, 0.2 pixels. But whenever you click this button, it'll go to 1 pixel. And you can experiment here. Sometimes I'll go up to 2 pixels like this. See those lines get a little bit wider. That's 2.1. Maybe I'll back it to 2, but you could take it up to 2.5, whatever you think you need. But you see those nice lines coming out right up in there. And then I'm just going to click OK. And now at this point, and you'll see some funkiness going on in here, but don't you worry, we'll fix that. But what we need to do at this point is turn this into a pixel layer. And there's a button right here on your MultiMask panel that you can turn any mask into a pixel layer. And sometimes you can create great black and whites or really cool art from any of the TK generated masks. So what we can do is click this button and we'll output that to a pixel layer just like that. Pretty simple, right? And now the next step for me is to refine this pixel layer. And to do that, I'm going to you could grab a curves adjustment, but I like to use levels for here. It's simpler. So click the levels adjustment. It puts a levels adjustment layer right here. And what I like to do is start out with the shadow adjustment. And I'm looking, see the funkiness here? I told you we'd take care of this. We're going to take this shadow slider and we'll start to drag it to the right. And what I'm trying to do here is make my blacks pure black. by dragging this to the right. And remember that little junk that was up in that right-hand corner? I got rid of it. And I'll show you how we could test this later for pure black, by the way, if in case you're wondering. Okay, and now like this area here, if I want to bring this out a little bit, I can take this mid-tone slider and drag it into the left. You see how I can bring those lines out a little bit more? I can keep going this way if I want to, so I can bring those out. It depends how much you want. And I don't know, I think maybe right about there looks good. And I really like this. It's a nice looking piece of line art. You know, I got white lines with a black background, but what if I wanted the opposite? Inversion, is that what you're thinking? And if you are 100% right. Now, there's two different ways we can invert. We can invert a pixel layer with this button right here on the combo panel, but I am not on a pixel layer, correct? I'd have to stamp this image and then invert it. But let me show you something here. This is another little tip and a little trick for you. See this button right here on the MultiMask panel? This is a special invert button. It'll invert normally like this button does, but this only works in a pixel layer, as I said. This one, when you click it, it'll invert your image, but it gives you an invert adjustment layer. Pretty nice, right? And then if you want to go back and invert it again, basically just shut the layer off. Isn't that cool? So you have two different looks here that you can go for. And you know what? Say we like it with the white background and the black lines. So let's try this now. We could come back to the levels adjustment here, and then we could play with these sliders here and see how I can lighten up the black areas a little bit, make them a little bit more gray. So we could shift that around. We can play with the shadow slider here, and moving it to the right now lightens it because now it's inverted. Okay, so there, and we can even play with the highlight slider, see what we get here. See, that'll make the blacks a little bit blacker if we want them. But you know what, maybe just a tiny wee bit, and let me go back to the midtones and then just go like this a little bit. So right there, I may say, you know what, that looks pretty cool. But another thing we can do is we could come to this pixel layer, and we could go ahead. Now, this is the time where you're playing, right? We could go ahead and see what happens if I pull back on this opacity a little bit. And remember, everything is inverted. That's why we're not seeing the blue colors, right? Okay, so you might want to try that and see what that does. Or you might want to come to the blend modes. I would recommend that you click the drop down here and then hover through these blend modes. And you might find a blend mode that looks really cool for this. And, you know, you'll strike out most of the time, but every now and then like that looks pretty cool, right? So there's a blend mode right there. Lighten, I kind of like that. Here's screen. Screen is kind of cool too. But you can go down through these different blend modes. Lighter color is pretty cool too. And feel free to play with these blend modes. It's like being a kid in a candy store. Have fun. So you can go down through here and see what you get. But for now, let's leave this one on normal. And don't forget, if you don't want it inverted, come up to the invert layer and just shut it off, and you'll have it non-inverted. Now, you may have to go back and adjust levels again, but let's say we do like this. We're going to keep this one. But I'm going to show you a little trick. Say you want to print this out and put this on your wall in your office, in some room in your house. And I think it looks really cool. You may want to put it in a frame or whatever. It makes a great piece of art. What you can do is come up to the combo or CX panel, click on this button right here. It gives you live clipping. Everything you see in red is solid white. Everything you see in blue is solid black. Now, solid white is a no-no, especially if you're going to print. Not so much for the internet, but if you wanted to print this out, these red areas are total clipping in the whites. If you go to print this out, what'll happen is no ink will hit that paper, and especially if you have like a glossy paper, it's going to look funky because you're not going to see any ink down there in the white areas, and it'll look weird. Believe me, it'll look weird. But there's a way we can get around this, and I'll show you what we can do. I want to say this about black. When we're making this line art, we don't care about blacks. We want our blacks to go really inky black, so we can clip them. That is no problem. Now, as you recall, I did invert this layer, so everything is opposite here on my curves. Now, here's what we need to do to protect these light areas, all these red areas here. Highlight the output level. This is normally shadows, and this is highlights over here, but remember, it's inverted. So what you need to do is type in 20, and you notice how that red went away. Now we're guaranteed that we will not get pure white. We're close to pure white, but not quite pure white, so ink will go down on the paper. And now you'll notice that clipping has gone away. Now this could vary from printer to printer. That number could be 20, it could be 22, it could be 19, but you might have to experiment a little bit. But this gets you in the ballpark. And now we could go ahead and shut off the live clipping layer, and all you have to do is come back to the combo panel and give it a click. And there you go. But right now, this is print ready. We could go ahead and print this out. We will not clip our whites. In other words, we're going to get some ink down on the paper. And by the way, if you're not inverting like I'm doing here, the output level on the left would be 0. This output level would be 235 to put some ink down on the whites, okay? In other words, if you're not inverting, this number right here should be 235. This output level number should be 0. Now, let's say I don't like these little black circles, so I could just, you would think, get a white brush, right, and just paint over here and we'd be good to go. But here's what we need to do now. Follow me closely. Now, remember also, I'm inverted here, right, so things are going to be a little backwards when you invert. So what we need to do is, and this is super important, because remember, on this layer right here, we have it set up so we're not clipping our whites, right? So we need to go underneath that levels layer, click on the mask to pixels layer, and get a blank pixel layer by clicking this button on the combo panel. And you can see there's that blank pixel layer. Now you would think if I would grab a white brush, I could paint on here, right? But look what's happening. It's turning black. Like, what the heck is going on here? Well, that's because this layer is inverted. Here's all you need to do. Let me just step back a step by clicking this button on my combo panel. Instead of a white brush, choose a black brush. Now, I know I'm painting on white and this sounds confusing, but this inversion layer means that if I paint with black in here, I could just paint these little circles off. You see that? And they're still being protected not to clip because I have this levels adjustment layer right here. So if I click on it, you can see I have the output level set to 20 and I'm inverted, so that will keep my whites from getting clipped. And now let me go back to this layer. Now, if I wasn't inverting, then on black areas I could paint with a black brush, and on white areas I could paint with a white brush. But in this case, this inversion layer, everything under it gets inverted. So if I wanted to remove this little white area right here, I'd have to go to a white brush, which when I paint over here, it would put that into black because of it's inverted, right? So I hope that makes sense to you. We have 2 more images to do. And if you're confused, hopefully your confusion will go away. So let's go on to the next image. Let me click on this image right here. This is a fun little image. Now, remember, if you want to bring out more edges in the shadows, you could put a levels or a curves adjustment layer above there and lighten up the shadows. I don't think I need it here, so I'm going to move on here. I don't want this video getting too long. So I would jump right into the edge mask secondly. So I'm going to click this button right here. And remember, I'm only using this one button here to maximize the edge size. This minimizes, this inverts, and this softens. I don't need any of these buttons here, just this button right here. And when I click it, it goes to 1 pixel. If I want to widen that edge, I could drag this to the right, but I think 1 pixel is good, and I'll just click OK. And now remember, this is my line art, so I need to output this as a pixel layer. So we'll click this button right here. It's just that simple, and there we go. I got to thinking after that first example, I think the next best step would be add a blank pixel layer above here for cleanup and editing for later on. So let's just click this button right here and add a blank pixel layer. Now above that blank pixel layer, let's go ahead and add a levels adjustment. So let's add our levels adjustment, and we'll start out by refining this. So what I want to do is I'll take this shadow slider and I'll start to drag it to the right. See that, how I can just clean up some of those areas in there. If I don't want those areas in there, I can bring this over like this. And if I wanted more of those areas, I could take this midtone slider and drag this over this way. But if I wanted just to have it black with white like that, I think I'm good right there. Now at this point, don't forget, we can experiment. Like, we could come to the mask to pixel layer, click on it, make it active, and maybe pull back on the opacity and see what we can get. We might like some kind of result we get there. That looks kind of cool. Let me take it back to 100%. And then the other thing we could try is on this same mask to pixels layer, run it through some different blend modes. Right now we're on normal. I'll click the drop down, hover through these different blend modes. And you never know, a lot will not work, but you might find one that does work. And you know what? I kind of like difference and exclusion. I like these two here. Those are kind of fun, but I'm not going to mess with that. And then remember, the other thing we can do is let's come back up to this top levels layer, and let's go ahead and do an inversion. So we're going to click this button right here, which gives us an invert adjustment layer. And I like that. I think it looks pretty cool, but let's try something here. Let's go back to levels and see what we can do. I'm going to take this shadow slider and I'm going to drag it over to the left. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. You see these gray sketchy areas? It's looking a little bit more like a sketch. Let me try dragging the midtone slider to the left. And check that out. I kind of like that. And now let me take this lightness slider, move it over a little bit. See, it gets a little more on the gray side. Maybe I'll do that. I'll bring that over to right about there. And I like that. I think that looks cool. Now let me tweak the midtones a little bit. See, I can lighten it to the right, darken it to the left. Let me take the shadow slider, move it in. Yeah, see, it's going to get crushed there. It's going to clip really bad. But I'm going to take this midtone slider, and I think right there, I kind of like that. Now let's click the before after button. Here's the before and here's the after. Now we can check for clipping. If we click this button right here, we can add a live clipping layer. And let's just see if we're clipping. Now we're not clipping anything, so we don't have to worry about a thing. We don't need the live clipping layer. Click on the live clipping button and that live clipping goes away. And of course I could still continue to edit here using masking or whatever I wanted, but I think it looks pretty cool just the way it is. Now I do have this layer here for cleanup, which at this point I don't think I really need to clean anything up, but if I wanted to, I could click on this layer and say, maybe grab the remove tool and maybe paint over, like say I don't want that in there or I don't want that in there, and I could go ahead and maybe I don't want this and clean things up a little bit. Maybe I don't want these guys over here, so let me just get rid of them and say I like the other ones in there. But I may want to get rid of all these type of things, but you can go ahead and edit to your heart's content. But this is the way we can make some line art, and I like this. This is more of a sketch look. So far we had this one, and I really like it, and we have this one. And now let's go to this one. Let's see what we can do with this. On this one, I think I want to lighten up some of the shadow areas to bring those shadow edges out more. So I'll click the levels button on the MultiMask panel, and I'll just take the midtone slider and drag it to the left a little bit just to lighten up the shadows so their edges show up more. And now we can come and click on this button on the MultiMask panel to go into edge masks. And I want to maximize the edge size, so we'll click this button right here, just this one. That's the only one we need to. We get the maximum dialog, and this gives you 1 pixel radius, as I've been telling you, so we can highlight this if we want to. We don't have to drag the slider, and I can just type in the number 2, and that goes up to 2 pixels, and I think that's what I like. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to click OK. Now at this point, I still need to refine what I have here, and you may say, well, Dave, why don't you use this levels here? But if I use this levels adjustment to refine, that adjustment would get baked in. After I click on the mask to pixels button, I couldn't go back and re-alter that. I'd have to redo everything over again. So therefore, what I'll do is just click this button right here and go to mask to pixels, and now I need to put a curves adjustment layer above here to refine this. But before I do that, I'm going to put a blank pixel layer above here. So I'll click this button on the combo panel. And remember, I said this will be my new workflow. I'll use this for editing and cleanup. And next, I'll grab my levels adjustment layer by clicking this button right here. And now I can make some adjustments and refine the look of this line art. I'll start by taking this shadow slider, and I'm going to drag it to the right to darken up all my dark tones. And now I can fine tune with this midtone. So if I drag it to the right, those lighter areas get darker. If I drag it to the left, they get lighter. So I just need to find a point that I want to lighten that to. And you know what? I'm going to darken it just a little bit to maybe right about here, I think is good. And now we can experiment a little bit. First off, let me go ahead and invert this. I like the way it looks right now, but let's click this button to invert it. And that looks pretty nice too. Now I'd have to go back to my levels and readjust it to refine it a little bit. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. So I could shut this layer off or just go ahead and delete it. I'm just going to click on this trash can and it deletes that layer. Now I'll click the mask to pixels layer, and I could take the opacity and pull it back and see what kind of an effect I can get, so that might be cool. I'll take it back to 100%. And now let's play with the blend modes. And I'll go through some of the different blend modes here. That's kind of cool. It adds some blue in there. These are all kind of fun. Let's find one that we really may like, and let's keep coming down through. That's kind of fun. As I go through the different blend modes, I'm not really filling any of these, so let's go with the straightforward black and white line art image. Let's go ahead and put a live clipping layer on the top layer, so we'll click this button on the combo panel. Okay, and you can see the blue areas are totally black. You can see I'm definitely clipping whites, but remember my little trick. If I come to the levels, this time I'm not inverted, so here my trick is to come here and type in 2, 3, 5. And you can see my clipping is gone. Now, when I print this out, I will be putting a little bit of ink down in the light areas of the image. And now I don't need live clipping anymore, so I can click this button again. Live clipping goes away. And now we could go ahead and come to this layer and clean up anything that we want. I went ahead and zoomed way in. Let's say I don't want all these gray areas in here. Say I want this solid black. So I'm using a polygonal lasso tool. I'm just going to click right here. Come down and click again, come out here, click and click and click and close this off. And now I'm on this blank pixel layer, right? So I can click this button on my combo panel, fill this with solid black, click OK, and just like that, it's gone. Now I can click this button to deselect. I'll click this button on the combo panel to fit it back to screen, and then I can look things over here, and I see there's a little white dot right there, so I could grab a black brush, click on the black brush, and I'm not using a soft edge. I'm just going to paint right over that, and anything that I see that I don't want, like right here, I can just paint over that, and I can paint over here. And again, I'm using this black brush as an eraser, and it has a very hard edge. If I get too close here, I'm not going to smear that, and I can paint off these. Now, the fact that this layer is below the levels, and if you remember, if I click on the levels layer, and remember I put this number in 235, I highlighted this field and typed in 235, which corresponds to this slider right here, meaning that my whites are not getting clipped. Remember that? And now when I click on this layer and make any adjustments, for instance, if I paint on white areas with a white brush, I don't have to worry that I'll clip those areas. I went ahead and zoomed way in just to show you. I'm just going to paint across here with a white brush, and you'll notice everything looks perfect here. You know, I could come down here and paint with a brush. Or again, I could just get like a polygonal lasso tool, and let's say I come here, I give this a click, come across here, and I like the polygonal lasso because it gives me a nice straight line. Let me come right here, come down into here. Let's come across here and back up here and just close it off here. And then I'll just click my fill button on my combo panel, and this time I'll change contents to white and click OK, and it just fills that right in, and now I can deselect. So that's how you do some editing there. But it's important to have this blank pixel layer underneath that levels layer. Even though you're painting with a white brush, you'll never clip. And now I'll click this button to fit back to screen. Well, there it is, everyone. Now you know how to make line art with edge masks with the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. Hey, if you enjoyed today's tutorial, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe, click that bell notification icon, click all so that you'll receive all notifications. And then every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll get notified about it. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly, and I will see you all right here next time. But until then, happy editing.